speakers to come, probably another 5 or 10 minutes.
Got my pen. This is her replacement page. So what's the?
Good morning, and we are going to get started with the Wednesday, December 13th, 2017 Policy Board of Directors meeting of the Monterey Bay Community Power. Secretary, please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Councilmember Brown. Here. Councilmember Kaufman Gomez.
Present.
Councilmember Termini.
Here.
Supervisor Parker.
Here.
Councilmember McShane is absent. Councilmember Hoffa is absent. Mayor Delgado is absent. Councilmember Orozco is absent. Supervisor Munzer.
Here.
Councilmember Friend.
Yes.
And Chair McPherson.
Here. Okay, we do have a quorum. We will now consider any late additions or deletions from the consent or regular agenda, and we do have some.
Yes, Chair, we have two. Agenda item number 7 has a replacement page to correct some issues in the resolution. And then on agenda item number 8, the staff report had a couple of corrections. And this is for the Operations Board. The proposed meeting schedule should include June 27th, 2018, and should exclude July 11th, 2018 as Operation Board meeting dates.
Okay, and those are, you do have those marked off and corrected in
That's-
okay,
Yes, that's correct. The resolution was corrected, and it's corrected in the staff report.
very well. Thank you. We'll now go to item number 3, oral communications for items that are not on today's agenda. Is there anyone who would like to address us on any items that are not on the agenda? Very well. Okay, we will go now to the consent agenda. Item number 4, the approval of the minutes from the September 13th, 2017 Policy Board meeting. Do we have any corrections or additions that anybody could see? Appreciate a motion to.
Minutes.
I'll second the motion to move the
Moved and
minutes.
seconded. All those in favor of approval of the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
So ordered unanimously. And now we have an addition, appointment of Bren Lair, Monterey Bay Community Power Board Clerk, to serve as our Board Secretary for Policy and Operations Board of Directors. Mr. Habashi, would you like to make a few comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bren is our first hire. We brought her in from the city of Santa Cruz. We're really delighted that she has plenty of experience working as the city clerk over at the city of Santa Cruz. And she's coming on board as one of our first full-time employees. And at this point, we don't have a secretary for the board. And I'm recommending that we adopt a resolution to have Bren be our first board secretary.
Very well.
I'll move, did you have a question? Sorry.
No, I will second
Okay.
the motion. And I just
I'll
wanted
move
to add
appointment
that
of Bren Lair.
I've had the pleasure of observing Bren in full operation in the city of Santa Cruz. And I don't know how you did it, Tom, but nice job.
Thank you. Well,
Have you've seen those city council meetings, right?
Why, yes.
Jack, make a comment.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment. I'm totally in favor of the motion, and I welcome a staff member to be our clerk, because when I went to look for the agenda for this meeting, there's nothing online and there's no history online. So I'm hoping that very soon we can have the board packets and the past packets and everything online, so it's easy for board members and the public to access. So.
Hey, Bren,
Thank
would
you.
you like to
No.
do you have, just want to say hello and just wave your hand? We want to let everybody know who she is.
Well, it's wonderful to be here. I'm very excited, especially with this new initiative going on in California. So I've worked with quite a few individuals, so I know a lot of you, and I'm glad to have that connection still. So I am happy, and it's been
Great.
wonderful working with Tom and the rest of the staff, too. So thank you.
Next to you, nobody is happier than Tom.
Or relieved.
Okay, we will move on to item number 6, the CEO's report. There's
Chairman.
several items.
You
that
need a
want-
vote?
Yeah,
Pardon me?
Yeah, do you have the motion?
We only had a motion
Oh,
to vote.
excuse me, I'm sorry.
That's
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? For
Aye.
appointment?
Aye. There we go.
Opposed? So ordered unanimously. So Bren, you're unanimously our first employee, so to speak. Tom, would you, our CEO's report from Tom
So
Habashi.
just quickly on the previous item, I do want to extend our deepest appreciation to Laurel for serving this board and the operations board since both boards were put together back in April of 2017. She's done a wonderful job, and so did just about everybody that we worked with the County of Santa Cruz. We're still keeping one sitting right next to me who did promise very early on to keep me out of jail, and I'm holding her to that promise. The County of Santa Cruz have been really, really a delight to work with in the past few months, and I'm really grateful for all the work that they've done, especially the work that Laurel have done for us.
I'd like to repeat that too, and Laurel's going to make a move in the county and step onward and upward, so that's terrific too. So congratulations. And I don't know if you might just want to make a few comments, because we really do appreciate the growing pains that we've gone through, and you've made them easier for us, more acceptable.
I just want to say thank you to the board and to the staff of Monterey Bay Community Power. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to help, get this off the ground and running. And I want to say a special thank you to Dana for just helping me to,
Keep you out of jail.
So, I just want to say thank you to everybody. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel. Okay, now we will go for the formal CEO's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to take the opportunity. I've been with you now for about 3 months, so I thought maybe this is this time to talk about the accomplishments that we have done so far, and very quickly to talk about some of the things that we will be doing over the next few months. So in terms of accomplishments, the first thing obviously was to put the Joint Action Agency together, and I wasn't around for that time. And thanks to all of you who've put a huge deal of effort over the last 3 to 4 years to make this agency happen. That effort was culminated eventually in March by having the Joint Action Agency form. And at that point, the first thing that you did, which is the wisest thing, is to look for a bank that will put a line of credit available to us so we can go ahead and start the work that we needed to do. That work was completed, and by October timeframe, we did have the line of credits. I've joined in September, but before that, we submitted the implementation plan to the CPUC, which was absolutely the first step that had to be taken in order for the agency to begin operation next year. The implementation plan was, again, submitted in August, and it was certified by the CPUC in mid-November. We have since signed an service agreement with PG&E. That agreement is now being circulated over PG&E for their signature, but I've signed it already, and you approved it a while back. The last step will be in that process will be to issue a bond for $100,000 that we can hand the CPUC, and they hold on to that money just in case we either go bankrupt or decided to go back on what we decided to do. They will use that money in order to have PG&E absorb the customers back into the service territory. So all those 3 steps, which are absolutely basic things that had to be done, are now have been done. Next, we needed to have 2 contracts that are essential in order to be able to operate both on buying wholesale power and to collect revenue from our customers or bill our customers. We needed 2 contracts for that. The data management contract, that's the one and call center that will govern the relationship between us and PG&E to allow us to be able to collect the revenue from our customers. And the second contract is the power scheduling coordination services, and that is the agreement that will govern the relationship between us and the supplier and the California Independent System Operator. So one covers the revenue side, one covers the expense side, with the supply being almost 95% of our total expenses. In order to have both functions work well, there's a lot of computer programming and coding that has to happen usually needs about 4 to 5 months. So we right on time. We already approved both contracts and both agencies that we are working with now. One on a data management side, that's a Grade X, and on power supply side coordination, scheduling coordination side, and that's the Energy Authority. Both of them are already working on getting all the coding taken care of and doing all the logic in their computer programs in order to be able to take care of the needs that we're going to have. Those programs, both contracts, by the way, they obviously need to be more than 1 year because it takes 6 months to prep the work without them getting paid anything. So we needed to have that contract be more than just a couple of years. So again, both contracts have been approved and now in the works. Obviously, we are in the business of buying wholesale electricity and selling it retail. That's our core business. And in order to do that, we have issued 2 RFOs, one on a short-term, for short-term supplies for 5 years, with the first year being 100% of our needs, then going down to 80%, 65, then 50. And the second one was for long-term supplies to cover roughly about 20% of our total demand by the year 2020. For the short-term supply, we've already negotiated with 7 different suppliers, as you can see on that list. Each one, we negotiated an enabling agreement and a confirmation agreement, and sometimes for some of them, we negotiated 2 confirmation agreements. For the 7 suppliers, we have a grand total of 16 different agreements that we've negotiated with those suppliers, 7 enabling and 9 confirmation agreements. Then we created something called a lockbox that will allow for us to put the money into that lockbox and for the suppliers to get the money out of that. And that is necessary because we don't have the credit or the savings or any money set aside in order to deal with the credit requirement that suppliers need in order to deal with us. So we negotiated 3 more agreements with the bank that all those suppliers needed to agree to in order to be able to work with us. So it's a 3-way agreement between us, the bank, as well as the suppliers that will be working with us in that lockbox. So a grand total of 19 agreements altogether to deal with all the short-term supplies that we are working on. All of them have been negotiated and completed with the exception of one. We're still kind of working the last crossing T's and dotted I's. Tomorrow, we will be doing some trading for the short term. We are asking for all those suppliers to give us refresh prices. Then the only thing that we're going to do tomorrow is to negotiate quantity and price. That's all. Everything else is dealt with. All the other paperwork is in place. And tomorrow, sometime between 9 o'clock in the morning and 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we should have a good portion of the short-term supplies that we need for the next 4 years all negotiated out. In terms of dollar amount, we are staying below 5 cents a kilowatt hour because that's what you gave us an allowance to do. We most likely, from the prices that I've seen so far, we're gonna be able to stay within that limit. The other thing is, by the time we're done, we are not likely to get everything that we asked for. There will be prices that will be somewhat off, that we may not fill every open positions that we have. We may need to go back again in a month or 2 months and begin to close more positions as we go forward. But tomorrow is likely to see anywhere between $400 to $500 million worth of contracts being locked at a certain price. And of course, we're going to report on that to you. I'm not going to wait 3 months to do that. There will be an email going out to all of you no later than early next week saying roughly this is what we've done.
Let me just ask, if I could, are you surprised, you have 19 contracts, you said in total.
Yes.
Are you surprised that there's so many, or is that, we're one of the bigger agencies, so is that a lot of, comparatively?
It would be, no matter how big or small, you still need some, actually, I'll take it back. Some of the early CCAs, they decided to work only with a single company, and to that extent, they only had to sign maybe one enablement agreement, a couple of confirmations, then the bank agreement, so total of 6. And I've done this at Silicon Valley, and I've done it here now. I don't think it's a good idea to just lock yourself with only a single supplier, because you will only get whatever price they put out there for you. It may be low as a single supplier. If you're only working for a single supplier, it may be the lowest. But if you work with a number of suppliers, you can find a different path that would allow you to, one, diversify among suppliers and also reduce your cost further. At Silicon Valley, we decided to do exactly that. We ended up working with 6 suppliers. And if we took the least expensive supplier, overall supplier, we would have had to pay $8 million more when we worked out that one day, $500 million worth of contracts that we locked ourselves into. So I like the diversification. I like to diversify the suppliers. I like to diversify the technologies. And I think that's the same path that I'm taking here at Monterey Bay.
Yes?
I do have a question, and that has to do with the contracts that we're getting, and if we're doing a 5-year plan, how that works with rate parity. If we've decided that we're doing rate parity for the first year out, are we looking at this and then deciding maybe 2, 3, speculatively, will we be able to do rate parity or discount it? When would we be looking at a decision to reach on any type of rate change that's maybe lower than a PG&E year 2, 3, or 4 out?
Yeah, for the first year, as you know, we decided to do rate parity, then do a rebate at the end of the year that will equal 3%, and we're going to talk about that later today. Most likely, we'll be able to do more in the following years. At this point, given what I know about PG&E's rates this year and projecting a couple of years ahead of time, I think we're going to be at rate parity. That is, we're going to be in a pretty decent position. We have already forecasted that out. PG&E will have to either drop their supply prices by a significant amount or raise their PCIe by a significant amount, or do a combination of both that will end up squeezing our net gross down to size. But right now we're looking at least for 2018, at a net gross of about maybe 25%, 30%, and I'm hoping to have even better news by the end of the day tomorrow, once we're done negotiating with those suppliers.
Thank you.
Questions?
Is that a quick question on contract you've negotiated for operation and billing? What are those going to cost overall?
Sure. For the data management side and the call center, the cost is going to be there will be 44 cents going to PG&E per customer per month. That we would have to pay regardless of which option we select. For the data management, it's going to be somewhere between 70 cents to $1, depending on which option we select, whether to do rate ready or bill ready. We are starting with bill ready because PG&E is not ready to do the rate ready, but we're going to start by paying $1 per customer per month. Then once the rate ready option, the PG&E makes it available, then we'll switch to that, and that will get us down to 70 cents per customer per month. Overall, if you just do the math and the number of customers and what have you, for this contract that we've signed with GridX, we may be looking at about $3.5 to $4 million a year to cover all the data management and the call center. And there will be another, roughly, I would say, maybe $1.2 million or $1.3 million to PG&E for doing the billing on our behalf.
And I'm talking down the road when we offer the program for people to make a decision to stay with PG&E or go with us.
Is your mic on?
I don't know how to turn it on, so.
There you go.
It's on.
Okay, and my question is that going to be explained to people so that when they look at the billing, one side or the other, they're going to see the breakdown that's going to give them the idea why one costs more than the other or one doesn't cost more than the other, whatever that case may be?
Yeah, generally, the postcard that we're going to send to customer to tell them what's going on, just tell them, usually what it says is, this is our rates, it's going to be comparable to PG&E, and you will be getting a rebate at the end of the year, and here's the options available to you. You can either do nothing, and that means you become, by default, our customer, or opt out, or opt over, which is the two products that we're going to be talking about later on, which is the MB Share and MB Green Plus. It doesn't really go into the details of comparison of why is it that we are much better.
Well, it may be something.
Yeah, that's all on the website. You can go there. They will have the rates. We'll have everything available on the website, but not in the postcard that we send.
Well, I'm just envisioning my constituents coming to me saying, well, explain this to me. Why are we doing this? I think that might be something that the new secretary would want to put on the website so that we can get the information, so that when people ask us the question, what does it cost, if it's going to stay with PG&E, what does it cost for the billing and stuff?
Yeah.
Just in case they ask the question.
Yeah, all that will be on the website. It will be explained, some of it anyway, in that notification that we're going to send to the customer. Okay. There will be the fine print on the back of that postcard. In the front, it will just say, here's what's going to happen. And
they're not going to read all that. They're going to walk up
yeah.
to me and go, what do I do?
Yeah, it'll be on the website, and it will be on the back of the card as well.
All right. I think it's important that we keep that up on the website so that we,
of course,
so that we can explain it out.
Like an FAQ?
Pardon?
Like an FAQ.
We just finished that last night, actually.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes,
Question, Tom.
Termini.
I know this pales in comparison to the $500 million, but the $100,000 check to the PUC, is that a check or is that a bond?
It's supposed to be a bond, but actually they take checks. So we actually going
And
to
how long
write
do
a check for $100,000.
How long do
and
they
hand it
hold
to them.
that?
They can hold it forever, as long as
enough.
PG&E continues to be the supplier of last resort. When that goes away, then I'm pretty sure we're going to have to bring that money back if we find that somebody else is going to be the supplier of last resort, whether that to be us or some other organization.
Good, thank you.
other questions? Okay.
The second work that we're doing is the long-term power supplies, and initially we've reduced the number of people that we want to be talking to. The short list, so to speak, it started with 4, 2 wind developers and 2 solar plus storage developers. Roughly the total megawatt hour for the wind was somewhere around 246, if I remember correctly. For the solar plus storage, it was closer to 260. We have since asked for certain deposits that they need to make in order for us to begin negotiating with them. One of the wind suppliers backed out because they didn't want to make any deposits to start negotiations. So we now, but it was the smaller one, so now we are down to 3 developers that we're going to be talking to, with 200 megawatt on the wind side and roughly about 260 something on solar plus storage. We've already started the first round. We showed them all the contracts that we have. They are going to mark it up. We'll go back and mark it up back again. We're going to have one discussion, probably a couple more discussions over the phone. Eventually, sometime in January, we'll get into a page turn, and we get together in a conference room, and one page after another just go through the contracts and eventually reach an agreement. Once we do that, we'll bring those agreements to you for approval. Looks like sometime around January time frame, we'll have some long-term arrangements in place. 2 are likely to be for 15 years. The third will be for 20 years. And Any of them, any of the three will provide us power at a flat rate, most likely to be south of 4 cents per kilowatt hour, which is a very good price, especially for solar plus storage. The last number that I've seen for solar plus storage was about 4.5 cents, and that was considered to be very, very low. I think we're going to be able to negotiate something even lower than that. And the wind is coming in at less than 4 cents, and that's a pretty good price as well. And these contracts will kick in sometime in early 2020 or 2021. And they should be sufficient, the way we're going to split them with Silicon Valley Clean Energy, they should be sufficient to meet about 20% of our total demand requirement. Then every 18 months or so, every couple of years, we'll go back and repeat the cycle, add another 10 to 20%, until eventually, maybe 10 years down the road, 100% of our needs will be met by long-term agreements.
Can I ask a question here?
Of course, sir.
When it comes to making the approval, are you comfortable with the frequency the policy meets if the policy board needs to go ahead and vote approval on these items? I think you mentioned January, and I know we won't have a meeting in January. So if we're not meeting for a couple months after that, are you still okay with the approval of this board for those contracts?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back and check to see if these contracts need to be approved by the operations board or the policy board. I think probably the operations board is the one that have the purview of approving them. Of course, we will inform you of what has happened. We'll keep you always up to date. But at least for this one, it's going to be the operations board that will likely to approve it.
Yeah, we just don't want to delay anything that you need approval with, either this board or the other board.
I wouldn't worry about it. I will always call you folks if necessary, and in case we have an emergency, I'll always ask for an emergency meeting.
Thank you.
Questions?
Now we get into the fun part, which is who's going to be doing all that work. So just to report on some of what we've done on the human resources side, we've got some long-term folks You've already met Bren, and you already appointed as the secretary for this board. I also like you to meet a few more folks that we have hired over the last couple of months, and they all started Monday of last week. Mark Buckman, he's our key account manager, and he's here, I know. Mark has got plenty of history working on with solar suppliers and working in the industry. He's going to be our key account manager, and he's going to be working with the large customers to make sure that they are happy with the work that we are doing and taking care of their needs. When they do have some helping them, we have James Mark, who is working with us on a contract that will take us all the way to, and here's James. And he got plenty of experience on the agricultural side, so he's going to be going out there and talking to our ag customers and to our large customers as well. He's out with us on a contract until the end of the fiscal year. Tiffany Law, she's our finance manager, and she is. And I mean, I can't be, I'm truly thankful that we hired her, because so much stuff that I was on my plate and on my laptop is now pushed into her end, and she's taken it all with strides, and she actually will be taking on some work on the IT side, so I'm very grateful that we got her. Mark Adado, you probably know him already. You've met him. He's been in one of the Santa Cruz folks that started this effort and been with it, and I'm delighted to have him. He's been incredibly helpful. He's going to be our community outreach fella, and he's doing really great so far, and he's taken on quite a few activities in addition to a person that you haven't met yet is Peter Bridge. He's going to come in as the communication manager, and he comes in, he starts January 8th after he does his 3 weeks mandatory annual trip to Iowa, apparently. So he's going to start with us pretty soon, but we already put him to work. We're going to have him involved in doing some interviews this week and next week, even though he's not officially with us yet. This is the staff that we hired so far. We got 2 more positions we're about to fill. We likely to make an offer probably sometime today for program coordinator, and that's the person that I hope will be dedicating nearly full time of our time putting together a stakeholder group and begin to work on programs with the folks that live and operate and do business in the 3 counties in order to start setting some programs for the future, whether they to be local solar or anything that has to do with reducing greenhouse gas from the transportation sector and so on. All these programs that we are likely to establish in the future, this person will be taking care of it. There's one other position that we're about to fill, and that's the marketing coordinator. We've already interviewed yesterday and picked 3 people. We're going to narrow them down to 1 and eventually bring that person in. Of course, over the next year, we're going to bring in probably another dozen people. By the end of next year, we're going to have probably 20 staff members. And I think we're going to most likely stop there and take a breather and see what we want to do next.
And through the chair, this is another, if as you have time, I think it would be helpful to make sure that on the web page there's a little background information about the staff members, so we have a sense and the public has a sense for the expertise they're bringing to the job.
Yeah, I believe Bill is here, and he will attest that he's working on putting together a page with headshots and titles and all background information about the staff members.
Thank you.
I've already talked about James being a contract employee. We also have Cynthia Jordan. She's doing a terrific job for us. She is right here in Watsonville, and she's working probably about 20 hours a week. Probably will be more than that early on in the process, but she's handling everything that's HR and taking a lot of that work on, and that's really very helpful. I don't have to introduce Dana. You already know her. She's been with us, and I know she's anxious to have me get somebody else to take on that role, and I keep taking my time, but eventually we'll have that happen pretty soon. We do have a number of consultants. We couldn't have got to this point without them. We've hired Alvarez Technology. They're doing the IT work, and they're setting up our new office. Lean, of course, you're familiar with Sean. She's been with us actually before I knew what CCE stands for. And she's going to stay with us. We're going to keep her until the end of September, along with all the other consultants that we have on board. Pacific Industry Advisors, they're helping me with anything that has to do with power supply, and their help is definitely invaluable. They do a pretty good job working with me on this. Miller Miller Maxfield, you already know them. They work on the communication side, and also we're going to keep them on until the end of the fiscal year. Michael Maher, which you did not meet and not likely to meet, he's our consultant accountant. He's keeping up the books, and he's working now very closely with our finance manager, Tiffany. We had ADP to do the payroll, obviously better than us trying to take it on. They do a lot of payroll activities, inclusive of benefit package administration and so on. And finally, we got the Delgavia Group, who is kind of designing the office and finishing it. And I worked with them at Silicon Valley. They did a heck of a job. That's why I decided to bring him in to help us furnish the office that we're going to be moving into. Supposedly by the end of this week, but I stopped there last night to see the progress. I get the feeling it's not going to be until the end of next week before we actually move in. But our scheduling move into the new office is December 15th. I'm hoping it will happen that way, but physically it's not likely that we're going to be there until the end of next week. All right. And this is all, by the way, I think we spoke of all the things that we're going to be doing already in the next few months, so That pretty much concludes my my remarks. And actually, no, I got
You
one
have a few
more
more things.
issue. Yeah, one more issue to talk about, and we're going to talk about what some of the program options that we put together. And I'm going to just to take a break. I'm going to ask Sean to jump in and talk about it. Yes.
I don't know if what would be the right time about the San Luis Obispo. Would you rather wait for that to talk about that?
Once we're done with that, I'll make sure that we talk about the San Luis Obispo. Sean, you want to jump
Great.
in?
Good morning, Board. Nice to see you all, and I am very happy with just the tremendous amount of progress that this agency has made here over the last couple of months, so certainly worth acknowledging that. As part of the overall package of progress, Tom and staff have been involved in discussing sort of how to frame what the product offerings would be for MBCP in this initial year. And so the three that you have up on the screen before you are what we are proposing. The first, of course, is MBCP's default product. We are calling that MB Choice. As you all have discussed previously, that will be carbon-free supply that includes 30% California-eligible renewables. It's worth noting that this definitely meets state renewable requirements and exceeds PG&E's carbon-free portfolio. So it does do better on the environmental attributes. As we've previously discussed, this product will be offered at cost parity to PG&E with the assumption that there will be a proposed 3% rebate offered in 2018 to all customers at certain intervals during the year, depending on customer class, so that large-scale commercial and agricultural customers will be given their rebate on a quarterly basis. Medium and small commercial will be paid out biannually, and residential customers will be given that credit at the end of each year, targeting December of each year to receive their rebate credit. So that's the general
Sorry to
package.
interrupt, but Mr.
Yes,
Chair, if I
please.
might, because there was an earlier question about how customers, ratepayers are going to perceive their bill, I mean, could you just confirm that their bill is essentially going to look exactly the same?
Correct.
And that the benefits that they get are higher renewable, sustainable energy
it's-
portfolio, and then they get the 3% rebate next year, possibly higher in future years. So
Correct. And so you're absolutely right about that. And really, the main thing to know about the default product is that it is a carbon-free power portfolio, which is unique, even in the CCA space, and certainly does better to meet our greenhouse gas reduction goals. It is offered at cost parity, so that means that it is net of any exit fees that are imposed by the utility. And then they get that 3% at the end of, or quarterly, or at the end of 2018. As to the bill, I think it's important to know that the bill will look almost exactly the same, with the exception of one line item that will say MBCP, or Monterey Bay Community Power Electric Generation. That replaces PG&E's electric generation. And then there's an additional page within the bill that provides an explanation of MBCP's rates and customer usage and all of that. So, but in the main, there's very little that changes in terms of how the customer, nothing that changes in terms of how the customer pays the bill and all of that. So we are working on all of that right now. So the second and third option are the voluntary options that we've designed for customers. The first of which is we're calling MB Green Plus. And what this allows is for the customer to redirect or allocate their 3% rebate in 2018 to instead support local renewable projects. And so in the initial years, that would be through power contracts that are located within the Tri-County region for renewable projects. In the out years, it could also mean co-developing projects based here in Monterey Bay. So that's our local renewable option that customers have. The third option is called MB Share. This is completely unique to CCAs, and we think a program worth replicating in other emergent programs. This allows customers to voluntarily donate, if they choose, their 3% rebate to fund local nonprofit organizations that are involved in climate change, greenhouse gas reduction, and or providing benefits to low-income ratepayers within the Tri-County region. We have been in initial conversation with the community foundations in all 3 counties. In the event that the policy board is interested in advancing this, all 3 have indicated significant interest in working with us, and essentially what that would mean is that they are then responsible, they're our sort of agent responsible for allocating those funds so that MBCP doesn't turn into its own foundation, because we have existing infrastructure to do that. A unique piece of this is that this particular program has
would otherwise pay PG&E, which most of the other programs out there, including some of PG&E's programs, they basically tell customers, we'll pay another penny or 2 pennies or 3 pennies a kilowatt hour, and we're going to do something good with it. We're saying, no, we don't want you to pay any more than that you would otherwise pay PG&E, and if you would let us have that 3%, we'll go out there and do something good with it, whether it to be building renewable resources local, or to give it to community foundations so they can do something good with it.
Councilman Gomez?
Oh, thank you. The local share option, once you've sort of come to fruition of what that's going to be with the foundations, it would be nice to go ahead and have a presentation from the foundations themselves on how they're going to go ahead and put this together, how long they're going to go ahead and, build enough reserve to be able to have something that they can work with and leverage. Because I believe going through the foundation, you may find that that's leveraged with other agencies that may want to contribute to make a bigger project than us taking the project on solely here. And then logistics of if somebody's going to get the rebate. For example, I think my 3% for electricity for the year might be $25. Just to give some idea of somebody doing calculations of how much I would be contributing back, whether it's going to be in some sort of a donation that we're going to get some sort of document that it's been donated that could be used for tax purposes, or to go back into a program that staff will be working with on bringing it back into the community. And then the difference between what we're doing versus giving to the foundations to do, so that we're not duplicating efforts on highest and best use of the money that's going back into programs in the community. So we're not spending twice on something that works really well.
So that's probably a pretty good estimate. We're talking probably $25 to $50 for, shall we say, normal customer?
I would say probably, yeah, you're not too far from, and that's for the residential customer, but please remember that our residents make roughly about 1/3 of our total consumption. So we want to target a lot of our commercial customers. And of course, we're going to start with the facilities that your agencies operate.
Yes.
Because you're the easiest target at this point. Then, of course, we're going to go to all the commercial customers, industrial customers. We'll try to tap as many as we possibly can to have them make a contribution. I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to get roughly about 5% or more of our total consumption to volunteer that rebate for us to do either Green Plus or to do Green Share with.
And we'll come back to you in March with to your point, with more logistics. Once we've set it up with the foundations, we figured out what the mechanics are going to be. What we needed to do was get the concept approved first, and now we'll put it into place and certainly come back to you. with
just-
full detail.
That might be a good time to have the foundations here.
Right, and yeah, definitely on that. And then I think the other thing too is, for example, if the city's making that choice, it probably needs to go through councils for the councils to decide if they're going to go with, this being an option for this building, any other buildings that are owned between the cities or the different county facilities, and go to their boards in terms of voting which option.
That's usually is the case, yes.
Director Brown, Santa Cruz?
Yeah, Trina actually already made the comment that I was going to make, but I would just add, I think to the extent, and this is probably obvious, but to the extent that we can get information about those logistics earlier in the process, and so we can help, people that we're talking with understand how the nonprofit contribution would be transmitted, the selection process for what nonprofits will get funded. I think that'll help ratepayers, customers want to select that as an option, right? If they actually know where the money's going aside from the community foundations. So thank you for that. I'll look forward to it.
Anything else?
That concludes my remarks.
Okay, thank you.
So these are the few
yeah.
products. So before we talk about what's next, I'm going to ask Mark Odado, who was yesterday attending a meeting down in San Luis Obispo. As you probably know, and I've reported before, that San Luis Obispo is thinking about joining the city of San Luis Obispo. Initially it was the county, then the county decided to put that on hold for a little while. It was the city was looking into it, and they've been in contact with us in the last few months. And I've been helping them as best as I can. And they were thinking about, one of their options was to join us. The other was to do their own thing, or to just table the idea of becoming a CCE altogether. That discussion took place yesterday, and I had both Mark Odado as well as Mark Buckman over there. And I'm going to ask Mark Odado to come in and just quickly share with us the results of that meeting.
Good morning, board members. It was an interesting meeting yesterday. There was a city council report out on 2 feasibility studies. Pardon me. One was a technical feasibility study for a tri-county effort. Another was an intra-county effort. And they were basically trying to figure out, as Tom has said, are they going to form their own program, solicit program proposals rather, to join other efforts or discontinue their efforts at all. And so they've been at this for a number of years now, with the County of Santa Barbara essentially taking the lead on their tri-county effort, which included San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, as well as Ventura counties, and 10 other jurisdictions, along with some funding from the Community Environmental Council. Essentially, their findings were that it's not a likely venture for those 3 counties to form a CCA, that it would not be able to provide competitive rates and not remain a solvent organization. So what they've decided to do is essentially table that tri-county effort, and it's going to continue on in the form of Santa Barbara City and Santa Barbara County moving their particular effort forward alone. And the second piece of this was the intra-county feasibility study. And this included the city of San Luis Obispo, that worked in parallel with the county of San Luis Obispo to come up with their initial study options. It also did not include any of the other unincorporated areas in the county of San Luis Obispo. So it's a smaller project, and essentially what they were trying to get some feedback from yesterday on these 2 models was, are we going to move forward and ask for some turnkey help from various vendors out there that can provide comprehensive services to support the development, the financing, the launch, and ongoing operations with no upfront costs? Or are we going to look at an incubator model, such as the City of Lancaster or perhaps Monterey Bay Community Power, that could fulfill that role? This would be kind of a hybrid approach, if you will. So these are things that they're still trying to sort out. And where the value proposition conversation was yesterday is in comparing these various options. Monterey Bay Community Power is very favorable in terms of providing speed and cost and risk. Their concerns in terms of trying to balance this are how much are we going to have control over local pricing, local programming, and ability to bring in smaller communities in their county to participate in our program should they decide to join later. So essentially, they decided to continue pursuing community choice energy, and they're going to put forward a request for proposals in the spring, and they're going to be continuing to look at their 4 options, essentially, and that is that the city would essentially go it alone and look for outside turnkey resources to help them do that, perhaps partner with other jurisdictions, such as the county or maybe Santa Barbara, since they're moving back from their tri-county effort, monitor Santa Barbara's efforts, as well as continue to look at joining Monterey Bay Community Power. And they'll be looking at issues in regards to how they want to design their renewable portfolio, their pricing, their governance structure, as I mentioned, their tolerance for risk, et cetera. And so that will be coming back to them in the spring. And I will let Sean make any comments in terms of the implications of the California Public Utilities Commission's current proposal in terms of submitting implementation plans and how that impacts their effort.
So they didn't want to go with this tri-county idea, huh? It's a long venture, but it's worth it once you get it. Is there any questions from the board that, yes?
My understanding too is Santa Barbara has both the 2 different utility companies. Is that one of the reasons why there's a mix of what they really want to do? I mean, you have Edison as well as PG&E in that.
Yeah, that complication, I think, was the issue that made their tri-county effort infeasible, and they would have to work directly with either utility. If they were to form a CCA, they'd have to have a CCA, as I understand, that would work with Pacific Gas and Electric, and another that would have to work with Southern California Edison. And this adds complication. But I'll let Sean correct me if I'm
You're
wrong.
correct. Yeah.
And then
It's an issue.
the RFP process, would that be something, if it comes in spring, it's going to go to the operations board for consideration and have that full discussion before we'd even come to this particular policy board?
I think once we see what that RFP is going to look like, that probably will help us figure out, is this something that we want to make a proposal to? Sometime between now and then, I will have a few discussion with the folks up there that I've been talking to for some time, just to gauge whether we should spend any more time doing this, or just stand by and help them as they move along in their process. Our goal really is to have them become a CCA, and whether that to be by being part of our CCA or by forming their own successful CCA, that's really our what we're striving for, is to make sure that they come in as soon as they possibly can, so we can just strengthen the whole CCA family, so to speak. So we'll see how that RFP looks like. Then we'll talk to you folks about it before we make any proposals. Obviously, this is a policy issue. We're not going to be out there just offering to help without getting direction from you folks.
Questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank
Mark.
you.
I appreciate it. I might just ask if the public has any comments or questions about the CEO's report. If anybody has, please identify yourself.
Yes, Kevin Dayton, Monterey resident, representing clear, honest options in clean energy choice. 2 things. First, as I told the operations board last week, people are impressed that this agency is coming together so well, obviously fiscally responsible, well managed, and I've been informing the various business and taxpayers organizations that I'm involved with about how this is going and how the meetings are going. People are pleased that the rates that are going to be offered for this coming year are not going to be higher than PG&E. That's going on the right track. Secondly, I have to say I knew that things weren't going well with San Luis Obispo County in terms of their plans for community choice aggregation, but this is the first time I had heard that they were looking at joining Monterey Bay Community Power as one of their options. And I hear that and I'm thinking, well, if this is something I think the policy board needs to take an aggressive lead on, if they can get a quick analysis, and I don't know if there's enough staff on board yet to actually do this, but take the opportunity and very aggressively pursue it if you think that this is going to help you to negotiate better deals with suppliers and other entities. I don't know who would want to take a lead on this in the policy board with the staff, but what an opportunity if you can bring on another county and all those customers in there and increase your power to negotiate better rates. Move on it right away. Try to move forward out of those 4 options. And I think that would probably involve elected officials talking with each other and building trust and relationships to say this is a good group to work for, to be involved with, and your interests will be considered in San Luis Obispo County because we're already dealing here with 3 different counties and their own diverse interests and working together on it. So that's my suggestion, is move aggressively on it if you determine this is something useful.
Thank you. I want to make it clear, too, that this is the city of San Luis Obispo that is discussing this option right now. Yeah.
Hi, Heidi Zamzo, Communities for Sustainable Monterey County. I just wanted to make a note that on the, is it the Green Plus option? The irony there is that it kind of disincentivizes conservation because the more you conserve, the less energy you use, the lower your rebate is going to be. And the less that can go into, local renewable projects. So I was wondering if there will be other opportunities for some of us who really want to push that part of it, the local build out, the going to 100% renewable. Will that be through these stakeholder groups that are coming together in some of those programs? Because if I were purely motivated by that, if I had not been so invested in MBCP for the last 3+ years, I would go with PG&Es. I would pay more and be able to go with, a higher renewable, not just carbon free. And then a second point about the changes in the bill. I think there will be, you will see, because there's a lot of volatility, right? So I think it was Ray Friend's point about things are going to be moving a lot, in the energy market anyway, in the regulatory market. And at the end of the day, people are just going to look at their bill. Now, your bill varies from month to month anyway, right? So what they will see, especially when, for instance, we have gas in our bill as well, and MBCP will have nothing to do with that, right? And there will be the fees. I mean, the only part that we take over is the procurement. So will it be clear as far as this is the only part that we can control, and we're just comparing apples to apples as far as this is what PG&E is charging for procurement right now versus what we are charging for procurement?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
There's actually an annual letter that we need to send to all of our customers, making a comparison between what we are providing versus what PG&E provides. And also there's a comparison between the renewable content in between us and PG&E that also will be available on the website. We'll do everything possible to get that point across, because you're right, there's certainly sometimes confusion over are we taking over PG&E, and we definitely want to make very clear that no, we're not. PG&E still controls all the wires, controls all the substations, they control the energy efficiency funds, they control all the metering, the billing, all that's still pretty much a PG&E. We're only taking the function of the generation side of the business, and we take every opportunity to kind of make that point across whether through graphic formats and on our website or in every presentation just about we give, we make that point. So yes, it will be made very clear to our customers what business are we in versus that PG&E still holds on to.
Yes, sir.
Hi there, my name is Andy Hartman. I'm a Santa Cruz City resident. I have a wonderful job with International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Also represent the Monterey Santa Cruz building trades. Anyhow, I got a couple questions. I was curious about the branding on why we're using carbon-free instead of greenhouse gas free. I mean, greenhouse gases are more comprehensive than just carbon. That's only one element. So I'm curious on that. Also on, as far as I love hearing about the transparency. I mean, I want to encourage that. I think that's a great thing. And in that vein, how much power are we buying from out of state? How much power are we buying in the form of RECs? And what kind of RECs are we buying? Are they from bucket 1, 2, or 3? So hopefully all of that information is readily available on the website as well. Thank you.
I don't know if you have
need me to
a response to that at this point.
Sure. In regard to what our portfolio is going to look like, it's a 30% renewable resources type 1 and 70% carbon-free, which likely to be large hydro. I can't for certain say how much of that will be out-of-state versus in-state because usually when suppliers offer these resources, they eventually will tell you which resources the energy came from somewhere around 45 days after delivery is concluded. So for every month, for the month of March, if they made a delivery of a certain carbon-free credits, then it will take probably till mid of May for them to be able to reveal which of the resources they have, the carbon-free resources that they have, that's where the energy came from. So they wait till after delivery is concluded before they tell you which resources they used. And they really couldn't tell you ahead of time because most of them own a large portfolio of resources. Some are in-state, some out of state. And they can't make any promises as to which tags they're going to hand you until the actual delivery takes place because they don't know ahead of time which resources they're going to operate in order to make that delivery of those carbon-free tags. I think there was a question about are we using credit? I just want to make it very clear that regardless of whether we are buying type 1 or type 2 and type 3, and probably, hopefully I'm not getting way too technical, but I'm pretty sure the speaker understands the difference. We, as well as every other CCE, as well as all the other utilities, whether they're municipal or investor-owned, really effectively buying credits. It's just some of them are credits coming from in-state resources or dynamically could be scheduled into to the state. And others are, whether it's the type 2 or the type 3, they tend to be more of a different type that it's less, at least quality as perceived by our state legislators. But we all pretty much buying credits, and that's the assurance that somebody somewhere in the state of California for the type 1 type of renewables will be operating a resource, and they will hand us the tags associated with that renewable resource as long as on annual basis the amount that we purchased equal the amount of tags that we received. They don't necessarily hand us those resources don't necessarily operate exactly on the days, on the hour that we act or ask for them to operate at. They just operate for the entire year to make sure that we get those number of tags that equal what we bought from that resource. And whether it's type 1, type 2, or type 3, as long as we get the quantity that we contracted for, then they have fulfilled their obligation, and we pretty much stayed true to the mission that we started with, which is sourcing renewable resources, sourcing carbon-free resources, not necessarily having delivery be 100% carbon-free, because we have no idea what the electricity that's coming to this town is made up of, but we can be sure and be clear about where the resources that we're going to buy are coming from. I hope that answers the question for the speaker, for the gentleman. I know that I may have just gotten a little technical, and we are having a workshop with you on January 20th for the sole purpose of to get a little bit more deeper into explaining how this whole thing works, because it's really necessary to spend a little time talking about what carbon-free is and what greenhouse gas-free is, what renewables are all renewables carbon-free, are they not? What's the difference between eligible renewable and just regular renewable? These are all very complicated questions that at one point or another need to be explained thoroughly.
Okay. Director Termini? You got it? Okay. Yes, sir.
Morning, everyone. Michael Saint with Citizens Climate Lobby. I just wanted to make one quick comment on the MB Share. I think it's an excellent program, and I would like to encourage everyone here to check that box, just so it goes to the people that are our lower income ratepayers. I think it's a good social justice action, and it's very impressive. The only thing I would add to that is, if it would be possible, I know it's going to just show as a credit on there, and most people kind of just take their bills and grab the bill, or they press a button and pay their bill. I think it should be sent out in check form once a year, and then if everyone would participate in that checking a box, that credit would be much larger, and people could use that as just to put it in savings or to use for bills, and it would also be a good advertising for the CCE here. If they had a personal check, maybe up around $100 would be nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to?
My name's Angela Lupanovich. I'm an attorney. I work almost exclusively with solar, wind, and other renewable energy developers and financiers and installers. And I think there is some concern in the local renewable energy industry here about how this is going to affect their businesses and the local renewable energy customers, such as rooftop solar. I'm wondering if you can talk about the plans to encourage the local renewable energy companies and the growth of the rooftop solar industry here locally.
As we shared with you earlier, the Green Plus program will be to encourage renewable development of renewable resources here in the region. One of the things that will be probably even better is when we put the stakeholder group together to talk about what programs to encourage in order to further reduce greenhouse gas, and that's going to happen sometime in February, March time frame when we begin to form that stakeholder group. I think if our mission and our goal is to maximize the reduction of greenhouse gas, then we need to look at all the various options available in order to do just that. And that's what I'm hoping that group eventually will do. And I'm sure the folks that developers of solar programs and solar rooftops will be represented in that group, so will others. The question is eventually what's the maximum amount of greenhouse gas reduction that you can get per dollar spent? And that's going to require some technical expertise, some really skilled facilitation, because that group is likely to have very diverse interests, and each one is obviously looking out for their interest. And so if we can get a good facilitator and a good technical support consultant and somebody on the staff that will help staff that group, and hopefully within 6 to 9 months we'll be able to come up with a list of programs, and expectations are not only the 3% that people will contribute to the Green Plus will go in there. We will plug in somewhere around 2% of our annual revenue to do programs. In addition, once we have collected enough and put enough in reserves over the next 2 to 2.5 years, we should have a reasonable sum of money left after we do our supply side operation to be able to dedicate to some of these programs in addition to giving additional rebates to the customers. So we're just starting. For the next couple of months, we'll be doing a lot of work in order just to get on the right footing, and from there will be a lot of fun to be had and a lot of issues, a lot of interest being represented and addressed over the next couple of years.
Questions, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate you mentioning the stakeholder group. It's on the slide here, but we haven't said anything. And I guess, could you just say, I think what you said is the purpose of the stakeholder group is to look at the ways to maximize greenhouse gas reduction. Could you just say a little more about what the purpose is?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you've heard often being requested and commented on during those meetings is folks are standing up and saying, well, what is it that we're going to do locally? Yeah, we understand that you're going to do a lot. You're going to do carbon-free for 100% of the, you're going to source 100% carbon-free. You're going to do that at the lowest cost. We're going to have rebates. We're going to have even money left over to put in reserves. But what is it that you are doing locally? And that stakeholder group is precisely to do that, is to look at all the programs available out there, whether that to be transportation, addressing transportation greenhouse gas, or addressing electric generation, any ways that we can further reduce greenhouse gas, and ask what are the programs available to do that. Then compare the programs, find out how to maximize the reduction of greenhouse gas, find out the programs that will have the highest level of penetration available, and on an annual basis we'll have a dedicated dollar amount, it's likely to be fairly large, that will be dedicated to do all these programs. And what I'm hoping that group will be able to do is eventually discuss among themselves how to rank those programs in a way to further reduce greenhouse gas, address all the local concerns and all the local jobs that we want to bring in to the area, and eventually come up with a bunch of programs that staff can take and begin to implement that will address not just one group's concerns or needs or interests, but the entire community's interests and needs. And I apologize, I was getting into that, into the what's next, because we do have a few more things to add to that.
Thank you, because I'd just like to make a couple comments about this, because as we're thinking about putting in, I'd love to hear what my colleagues think, because I think the direction you're going and really making sure there's a group that's going to think deeply about these things is important. I would also, and I'm not sure how it fits into how we make decisions in terms of our long-term supply, but I kind of see a couple of opportunities. One is that the stakeholder group could be looking at definitely local power generation and how that can happen. And maximizing the reduction of greenhouse gases. I also think that in terms of our long-term procurement, we want to be looking at that. And I think there are some, in terms of the community values, that we want to make sure are being taken into consideration, both in the stakeholder group. But I think if they're going to be ranking things, we may be able to use that ranking for some of the long-term purchase criteria. And here's what I'm thinking about. There are labor considerations, environmental considerations, renewable versus, just carbon-free. I mean, there are a lot of considerations that this board is not going to, we may get workshops, but we're not going to live it and breathe it. And I think that this group, it'd be important to have on the stakeholder group, some of the labor organizations, the sustainability organizations that have really worked to bring this forward, community power forward, so that we're looking at the reduction of greenhouse gases, but we're also, as someone mentioned, there's a social justice component here too that we want to make sure we're addressing. And I think the stakeholder group might be a way to put together criteria, maybe weighted criteria. Is it local? Is it renewable? Is it, what are the impacts on the environment, so that as we're looking at price and we're looking at greenhouse gas reduction, we're also weighing the overall sustainability of what we're doing, so that we're not, hurting one aspect of our livelihood in order to get another. So anyway, just thinking about making sure that this stakeholder group, possibly, because this looks like where there's going to be some really in-depth exploration of some of these issues, that it can also include some of the labor and environmental and other social justice kind of considerations as we're setting up ranking and criteria. Again, as I say, for the local and having ranking having to do with local employment and power generation and so on. Having that be part of that special pot of money, but also our long-term thinking of where we buy our power and what power we buy, and how we weigh all those. Anyway, just wanted to put that out there, that I think that's an important component. That's part of the thinking that brought us community power, and I think we need to keep it included in the way that we're thinking about going forward. So.
Just to address a couple of issues really quickly. I agree that the criteria by which this group eventually need to weigh in and consider the various programs need to be put up front and approved by the board before we go any further, and what components that should include that eventually will have to be discussed and ironed out. I do want to point out an important issue, which is mixing up the power procurement side to meet our annual supply obligation with the mix with that group, because quite frankly, I think that the power supply component really shouldn't be part of that. And this is the reason. When we did our long-term power supply RFO, we had 30 different suppliers promoting or suggesting that they would build somewhere around 7,000 megawatt generation. All of them are renewable resources, all over the place. So there was a portfolio of 7,000 megawatt that we can tap from. All we needed really was about maybe 300-400, but we had so many offers from those 30 suppliers for different places, different sizes, you name it. Out of this, and there was 70 different options that we could to choose from. There was a single option being offered by one supplier for 20 megawatt out of 7,000. That was here in the county of Monterey. All the others were somewhere else. In California, most of them are in California, but they're not in this region. It's 20 megawatt out of 70,000. The price that was offered for that small solar plus storage was roughly twice as much as the price for the prices of the resources that we're going to be negotiating with over the next couple of months. And that's where the rub comes in, because if we begin to try to bring in a local decision to figure out what to do with the money that we have, that we don't want to be saving, because we need to do good with it in a community, trying to suggest that we need to mix the power supply component, which our requirements are huge. They're not, 20 megawatt barely is good enough to meet about 1% of our needs. So it would be a whole lot of 20 megawatts that I need to chase after in order to have all the local supply, have all the supply that we need be local.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt because I think you misunderstood my meaning. I'm not talking black and white, all or nothing. I'm talking about setting up some criteria that are maybe weighted. I understand you can't let a tiny hair on the tail of the dog wag the dog, but I think what we're talking about is setting up some broad parameters of things that we would like to see. And in the long-term procurement, it could be that we want to aim to, within the pricing considerations that we have to take into account and the reliability, how much of it can be in California, how much of it can be local, how much of it can we make sure has fair labor practices, how much can we make sure is not being, hasn't been set up in places that are of dubious value to the environment, if, or a negative impact on the environment. How can we set up some criteria so that when we have some wiggle room, we can be aiming for something that has the most beneficial effect on a number of criteria. Not to say that we would put all our eggs, that we say, oh, well, local is so important that it has to be local regardless of price. No, I'm talking about setting up those kinds of, having the conversation about what considerations could be included, and then how much weight to give them. And then, it's going to be a judgment call as time goes on. But if we don't have the conversation about the elements that we'd like to have included in the criteria, we're never going to be able to include them. Sometimes it won't be feasible to take that into account, but sometimes it will be. And especially if we're doing longer term planning, that was just my point, is not all or nothing, and that some of the considerations that are being talked about on the local generation could have some meaning and some value in the general power procurement. The weighting might be a little different, might be very different. But I'm just trying to say that as we put together a group that's going to examine these things deeply, that we include some of the community partners who brought us community power, who sold it to the community, so that we're really taking into account the community values that were part of our success in getting here today.
Director Brown?
Yeah, I would just echo your comments and suggest that perhaps if a stakeholder group is creating some kind of criteria for rankings for the special pot of money for program, that perhaps those criteria could also be used for guidance for our longer term contract decision making, and not to suggest that this group would influence that in the same way that we'll make those decisions, but it could provide us some guidance for best case and not falling into the potential for greenwashing, as you suggest.
Right. Be a point of discussion or retreat, so that'd be two. Excuse me.
I appreciate all those points. I'm more interested in actually forming the group. So we need to move that along.
Yeah, I think you're all going to have to bear with me until we get this program started, so to speak. This party is not a party yet. We're still in a phase of just trying to get it to put it together, to actually have money on hand that we can use in order to do good things for the community. So that's why I'm saying it's going to be the February-March time frame. So most likely in the next meeting that you folks are going to have in March, there will be a recommended approach to what the group should be made up of. Here's the criteria. Here's the specific task for that group. And here's the life cycle for that group, because I'm not looking, nor I'm recommending, unless you tell me otherwise, to have a group to be there indefinitely. I'm looking for a group to be there for a specific purpose, which is to look at the various options and programs out there and rank them in terms of priority and tell us how much to spend on each one of those programs. Of course, when we come back to you and saying here's the made up of the group and here's the criteria, you can say, well, I want to add this or that criteria to it, and then we can go from there.
You have a question, Mr. Munzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When this idea was first rolled out, it was presented that we would be able to purchase the extra power that rooftop installations did, and this is in vein of I think the last speaker. And then after a little bit, then that became maybe a possibility that this board would have to decide on at some point. And I think in light of Director Parker's long-term planning, I hope that would be discussed and looked into whether we would be able to purchase the extra power that rooftop insulation could produce. Because my understanding is the installers only recommend 80% of the use, and maybe we can encourage closer to the 100%, and then whatever is, produced extra, we'd be able to purchase. So I hope that would be included in the long-range planning.
Director, we do purchase all of the solar, whether it's on rooftops or behind the meter or even away from the meter. That's all.
Well, that's already been decided?
It's not a decision. This is the way it is. This is the way if you install solar on your rooftop or anywhere, the energy comes out of it. It's going to be purchased by us. The question is, what do you pay for it? Really, that's the rub for a lot of the developers nowadays. Most developers would like to get 36 cents a kilowatt hour for the surplus power that they sell out of those solar, where in reality I can get it from the market on the average for 2 cents. Okay. So that's really that's really the issue. It's how much you pay for it. It's not a question of whether I'm going to buy it or not.
Okay,
once you connect, I'm buying it. Okay. It's just for how much. That's really the issue.
Thank you.
I'll make a brief comment because I know that we should probably move on. And it is a matter of the cost factor that's out there and the storage capacity, because during the middle of the day when we peak, it's actually, we're giving power away because there's so much generated at that particular junction. And what we're after is the bigger picture of the 24-hour scope, where you don't have the solar activity, which costs us a lot more money. We're having to make sure that we've covered all of the costs all the way around there for it. But certainly, I would suggest moving on, and this is definitely something that will be part of the conversation when it comes to the group getting together as an ad hoc situation.
Oh, question from the audience.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brennan Jensen with Emerging Ecologies, and I also serve as the co-chair of the Monterey Bay Regional Climate Action Compact. We were one of the organizations that were out there kind of selling this program, as Jane mentioned. I want to acknowledge Jane and others for their comments around the formation of the stakeholder group. And I'd like to also just remind this body that all of the resolutions that were passed by the 20 members of this agencies included a governance chart that had a box for an advisory committee. So that was something that all of our jurisdictions committed to, and it is something that our community desires. So I'm really glad to hear that there's some very nice conversation that's happening here, and that there's a proposal on the table to form this group. And I would also like to recommend that that body is a permanent body that is comprised of a diverse number of representatives from across our region that represents our local community. That's certainly embedded in community choice. That it's a permanent body and that it has the opportunity to participate meaningfully in what kinds of decisions are made both operationally and from a policy level. I appreciate that there's a comment made that in particular there's interest in having that body weigh in on the complementary program offering, and I think that is great. I also just heard Tom say 2% of the budget would go towards that. I think previously I'd heard 1%. So I'd actually like some clarity on what we think that percentage is, both in terms of percent and actual dollars that might be available for those complementary programs, and how that decision is going to be made. Is there opportunity for that percentage to change? My understanding is that at this stage, we're anticipating being able to pay off the debt and establish a very robust reserve structure, which I think is a really good way to do this, within just a few years. So that may actually give this agency unique latitude to be able to increase that percentage to something a little bit higher that would allow us to go after some of these local clean energy goals that were also a principal element of how we formed this agency to begin with. I'd like to also encourage the agency on the 20th workshop that's happening on January 20th to provide some additional information about this difference between carbon-free and renewable energy generation. I think this is a key point of confusion for the community because that's a different language and it has a different connotation. And I think folks were really expecting to see a higher renewable energy generation within our offering. So the 30% I think is a little bit disappointing, and we'd love to see an option that has something higher than that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
First off, just want to commend everyone and say thank you for getting this community power agency up and going. I'm Benjamin Eichert from Green Power and the Romero Institute, by the way. We are constantly seeing, it feels like almost weekly, kind of existential threats to the community choice energy movement pop up on the horizon. And so it's great that we're getting this up and running, and really excited that we're going to start delivering power next year. I do want to echo a couple of things that some folks have said. Would really love to see the formation of maybe a little bit more robust community advisory component than just an ad hoc short-term stakeholder group, one that is representative of our region's diverse communities and that really can contribute in a meaningful way to the overall vision of what this community power agency is now and will be going into the future. Also, just hoping that the CEO or someone could respond to a quick question. I think you mentioned that you're hoping about 5% of people maybe opt over to one of these programs. Are you able to project or just give us a rough estimate of what you think that would look like in terms of, let's just say 5% opt over to Green Plus. What would that look like in terms of how many dollars would be put in then into the local renewables? And then also kind of following up on Brennan's question, are you able now to say, kind of thinking about this 2% that would be put into other types of programs, are you able to estimate what you think that looks like?
Yeah, just made the calculation while you're talking,
Okay,
Ben.
cool.
To the extent that we get 5% of our total demand participating, then we probably will end up with 375,000 roughly. This is in a standard operating year, not for 2018, because that's not going to be a standard operating year. But for a full operating year, we'll be looking at about 375,000.
And then on the 2%, I think that was mentioned of operating that would go towards program.
Yeah, probably I need to be clear here that for 2017, 2018, in that budget year, we have 1% being put aside for programs, and that is likely only for that year, which ends September last. So we're only going to have 7 months of our commercial in and 3 months of our residential. We're probably going to be looking at maybe $1.5 million, a little less than that, available for programs. But this is again for 2017, 2018. Everything that we shared with you is only for 2017, 2018, because we just wanted to get this through this year. Then probably we'll see clearly to be able to make determination beyond that. Personally, and I've done it before in a different agency, my recommendation would be for the following year that percent goes up to 2% for 2018, 2019. And we are likely to end up with a rebate that will be higher than 3%. I would predict maybe about 5%, to the extent that we split the leftover money. 80% goes to reserves and 20% go to rebate. So that rebate now becomes closer to 5% or maybe even 6%, which takes that 375,000 that I shared with you, to the extent that we get about 5% of all of our contribution going into the two programs, Green Plus or Green Share. Green Plus or Share. then that number really goes up to about maybe $750,000 in addition to the 2%, which in a full year program, which is going to be 2018, 2019, that would be closer to $5 million. So $5 million will be dedicated for programs. Additional money will be coming in through these two opt-over programs that will be closer to $750,000. That gives you a rough idea about how much money will be going into those programs. Once we have enough money in reserves, once we hit the target in reserves, which I hope to be somewhere around 50% of our operating expenses, I'm predicting that it will take about 2.5 years to get us there. Then, and to the extent the PCIA doesn't go way up and that the power supply prices for PG&E doesn't go way down, we should have a roughly about $30 to $40 million on an annual basis that this board can dedicate however they want to dedicate that money to, whether to be put it all in programs, give half of it to rebates and the other half for programs, and so on. I hope that addresses your questions.
It does. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah, I just want to, I'm overly enthusiastic about this whole thing, and we're throwing around some numbers, and I just want to be cautious. We're not making money for a little while, so let's don't start counting what you can do with it yet. Let's be enthusiastic, but let's be realistic too. We have some time before all this is going to be put into place. I think we're on our way to doing it. I'm confident of that, but I just want to cool a few jets out there maybe about the money's going to be at your door in Christmas. It's not going to happen this year. So,
and Mr. Chair, if I could, I think this will be helpful when we get the past agenda packet materials online, because these projections were given to us at the last meeting, I think it was. And, yes, it's all projections. We don't really know. But when this information is available, then people can go back and look, and we don't have to keep asking the question. So it's
Director Parker, the information is there. It has been there since day one. All the agenda, all the previous packets, they're all online.
Where?
Everything is online.
Oh, because when I go to the Monterey Bay Community Power, I don't find it. So I'm sorry. I guess I missed it.
Yeah, just look for resources, look for agenda packets, and it will be month in and month out for each one of the boards. You'll find all the packets in there, all the information that you folks at one point or another had the chance to see.
Okay, under resources.
Yes.
All right. Oh, thank you. It didn't occur to me to look there. Background documents.
Yes.
Okay. I think maybe delineating it a little more clearly, because
They're working on
it
that.
wouldn't have occurred to me to look there. So thank you.
okay.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, then I think we'll go on to item number 7, then adopting the approval of the 2018 rates and rebates schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've talked about it now so many times. The report before you requests approval of the rates. The rates will be identical to that of PG&E. I do need to note that we are working still on NEM rates. NEM is net energy metering. As it turned out, it's not as easy to work these rates into our program, given the way the PG&E is working them right now. So we're still working on it. We will do our best to, if not match what PG&E is doing, and try to do a little bit better. Going back to the point that was made earlier, right now, PG&E, if you do generate more than what you need, PG&E takes that additional kilowatt hours at wholesale prices, which at this point ranges in the 3 to 4 cents a kilowatt hour, actually maybe even less. That's what PG&E offers. That's what customers can get if they oversize their solar rooftop system. We've going to be recommending to you, eventually we're going to have to come back to you with recommendation, but we're going to be recommending to you that to the extent the customer do oversize and they end up having more generation than demand, then we will buy the electricity from them at retail rates instead of wholesale rates, which in our case for residential customers should be somewhere around 6 cents a kilowatt hour. That's the only one deviation at this point that we made from PG&E's rate schedules. Everything else is, we are asking you to approve our rates to be comparable with PG&E, with all caveats that are necessary in order to make sure that we can actually program them correctly. So we're not asking to do anything more or less. We just want to make sure that we are able to work the rates in a way that PG&E can charge for them and eventually move the money into our coffers, so to speak. We also asking for the rebate to be set at 3%. So it's not, we're not going to wait until the end of the year to calculate it. We know we're going to, at the end of the year, know we're going to have more than 3% left over. Most of that money is going to be pushed into reserves. The 3% is really based on our assumptions today, is 10% of the total money that's left over. 90% will move to reserves, 10% will be given as rebate. During the hours between 12 noon and 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they pay the customers based on one of the rate schedules 36 cents a kilowatt hour. That's what they credit the customer for, which is in today is solar is just, I cannot understand it or justify it by any stretch, because that power today you can buy it at the wholesale market sometimes at negative prices. You actually have the ISO paying you in order to take that power, because there's so much consumption, so much generation coming from solar during those hours that has now becoming counterproductive to have it happen during peak hours. These are the things that we need to be thinking about in the future. But what rates we need to pay? Do we continue to encourage solar rooftops without storage? And I personally would not recommend it. I don't think it's a wise thing to do.
Right.
But we also don't want to do, we don't want people that will put storage to be having to spend more money and get nothing for it, which is exactly what's going on today with PG&E. They don't get any value for the amount of energy that they store and let out at the time when the grid needs it. That's why on Monday I spent 3 hours with some of the brightest brains in this industry trying to figure out how we're going to deal with the NEM rates, and we did not come to a conclusion. We're going to have a few more of those sessions in order to come up with something that makes sense, that will be logical, that will be encouraging the right thing to do for a lot of local generation.
Thank you.
Questions?
I
Yes.
had a question. So you just mentioned that basically we're setting the rates to be on parity with PG&E and to set the 3% rebate. But you also said that Monterey Bay Community Power would pay 6 cents per kilowatt hour for excess rooftop solar. Is that in this, or that's just something that you're thinking about? Because I didn't really see that in the narrative anyway.
Yeah, you're correct, because we just sort of decided to recommend that eventually when we recommend all the other NEM customers. At this point, really and effectively, the rates that we put in there, we're saying we're going to be a parity with PG&E. For all practical purposes, we are saying we're going to be a parity with PG&E on all rate schedules, except for the NEM schedules, which it's taken us a little more time to try to figure out how to do it and how to do it right.
Got it. Thank you. So the NEM schedule will come sort of in January when we do the adjustment, or?
Well, yes.
Super. Thank
Most
you.
likely, if not in January, will be definitely in the next meeting where you guys get together in March.
Great. Thank you.
Comments from the board members? Any comments from the public?
Brennan Jensen. I just want to commend the agency on this proposed rate structure, especially with the opportunity to be able to return the 3% for localized investment and the opportunity to donate that through a tax deductible donation to a nonprofit. I think those are really innovative ideas and strongly support that. And I also would like to state that we are interested in having additional options in the future that have higher offerings for the renewable energy generation portfolio and or local energy production. That was definitely something that was identified early on as a need. I understand if that may not quite be ready for prime time yet, but we would be interested to know if that is part of the agency's kind of midterm goal and what the timeline for that would be. We'd love to see that happen in, say, year 2 or 3. Thank you.
Hi there, Andy Hartman again. So I'd like to echo the same concern. Originally going into this, we had talked about that we could do this cheaper, we could do it better. And that was sort of the idea that I think that was being sold to everyone. And to come in at rate parity, that's fine, I guess. But something that we could shoot for in the future is to do it cheaper, to do it greener, to give people more options. I mean, you do have 3 options, but we're not really giving anybody any more green power. Everybody's getting the same power portfolio. So to have options in the future where we could say, if you want to be ultra green or whatever you want to call it, I mean, similar to what like Marin Clean Energy is doing, having options where it's not just moving monies around, but you are getting, people that are interested in getting greener power have that ability to do that. I mean, this is about community choice and giving consumers the choice. So thank you.
Michael Sain again from Aptos. Just 2 quick questions. First about PG&E's exit fees and surcharges. Sort of like Mr. Friend had said, I go to my groups and everybody asks me about what's going on with Monterey Bay Community Power. And this question is from my CCL group. Do any of the PG&E exit fees diminish or go away over time? If they would would we use that decrease in charge to decrease rates or increase energy build out or increase rebates? The second question that came up was PG&E basically, due to their recent fires in Northern California and also the gas line explosion in San Bruno, there's lots of liability there that PG&E incurs. I think they were fined $1.6 billion for the explosion in San Bruno. We as a CCA, are we responsible for any of this liability in these upcoming litigation procedures? Also, is there any concern that PG&E's charges will continue to increase to cover some of their litigation in the future and all the costs? Thank you.
Sure, happy to address it.
Yes,
I'm going to take the second one first, which is we have no say in, nor do we pay for any of the charges that PG&E would incur in order to deal with fixing up the wires, dealing with all the problems that they had due to fire. That's between PG&E, CPUC, and all the other groups that get involved into the making of the PG&E rates. This is all going to be on the distribution side of the business, not the generation side. To the extent that the first question was, do the exit fees diminish with time? Logic has it that it should, because they're not buying any more of these expensive resources that they bought over time. They're losing customers day in and day out, so they're no longer into the buying supply power. So it should take another maybe 10, 15 years, hopefully no more than 20. Before all these expensive contracts that they bought into at one point or another all go away. And at that point, obviously, the exit fees diminish, go away, which will leave us with obviously more money to do good things with it. Again, we are hoping that power supply prices don't skyrocket, that this tax bill that's coming our way doesn't increase the cost of some of the renewable resources available. I'm optimistic that inside 20 years, perhaps, we will be able to, at least in California, go 100% renewable resources. Combination of solar, wind, and storage and hydro. I do consider it to be a renewable resource, and geothermal. And that would be sufficient to meet all of our needs here in the state of California. As it is now, that's not the case. Still, this state relies on fossil fuels to the good of maybe 45%, maybe 50% of its needs. But that is slowly being diminished and going away. One natural gas resource after another is going into mothballing. They're shutting them down one after the other. The cost of storage is coming down considerably. And that's something else that we need to be mindful of as we begin to think about how we're going to make this neighborhood greener, that we don't rush now into doing what PG&E rushed into doing about 6-7 years ago when they went out and signed contracts that cost them somewhere around 9 or 8 cents a kilowatt hour. And now these contracts, same resources, are being signed for 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour. So we just need to be careful and not to rush to doing anything very quickly. And we need to methodically take it one step at a time until we hopefully reach that point where we can actually completely get rid of the burning of fossil fuels in order to generate electricity.
Okay. Mr. Termini.
One question sort of in the same vein. Will our clients be made to pay anything for that the $190 million that the CPUC granted to PG&E for the closing of Diablo?
They actually have been paying for it for quite some time. The decommissioning of Diablo is part of your bill. If you look at it, there's a line item in there that has to do with the decommissioning of Diablo. There's quite a few line items that has to do with paying for the time when they went bankrupt and DWR had to step in and supply power on their behalf.
Will that continue?
I would assume it will, and I'll be honest with you, I don't exactly know when it's going to all go away.
Okay.
I'm hoping that it does before or right after Diablo is completely decommissioned and not stay on forever.
Questions?
Question. So the public raised a question that's so obvious, I totally missed it, which is, we had thought that we would be having tiers that could go greener and might be a little bit more expensive. So when is that envisioned? Is that in the second year?
Yes. Yeah. We have tried with the three options that we have here is really to be as simple and easy to implement for the people who are the grade X who are doing now doing all the coding in order to make sure that the revenues will get in appropriately. There's considerable amount of work that has to be done at that end. So I am doing, and our staff is doing everything that we can do in order to make that transition and have them be ready by March 1st. And it's considerable amount of work. And I think those three options made it really simple for those guys to be able to get all the coding done without having to worry too much about any additional options that could take more time in order for them to be able to code. Just to get us through the first year, we're going to have between now and next September when we come back again, talk about what new rates we can put in, maybe other options for people if they want to have money, contribute money to us. Maybe we'll have a line item there where they can actually put in additional money if they want. The variety of ways that we can bring in more money from folks that would like to do good with it. We have now two options, the MB Share and the MB Green Plus. We can increase that percent from just the rebate amount to twice the rebate, 3 times the rebate, and have people put even more than what they would otherwise have done with PG&E if they so choose.
Okay, thank you. Well, I will go ahead and move staff recommendation with direction to, by this time next year, to be talking about the other tiers for our ratepayers to see, to give them the choices to actually have more renewables or, to have those kinds of choices. But I completely understand we need to get this thing going. But I would hope by next year we'll be able to be looking at those other options.
Could you please include in your motion the authority to change a typo in the signature block? It
Yes,
should be
with the
for
revised resolution. Yes, thank you.
Have a motion?
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion by the board? Any other discussion?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I concur with Mr. Habashi that let's get everything up and running and functioning, because we're throwing a lot of darts on that board and keeping the primary focus that switch turns on in March, and still getting the organizational structure together. So these will start to be incorporated in the dialogue as you get more staffing to help with the resources for this planning.
Okay. Understood. Yeah, that's why. Yeah, we're on our way and moving fast. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Now we will go to item number 8, adopt a resolution approving the policy board meetings calendar.
That's when I get to take another break, Mr. Chairman, and I'm going to have Sean jump in and take this item.
I think this will be a very quick item for your board. As per the information that you have in the packet and the revision that you had this morning, we are proposing that the policy board continue to meet on a quarterly basis in 2018. The first Wednesday of March, June, and December, the second Wednesday in September, and the reason for that is that the operations board is going to go ahead and take that first Wednesday, and then you guys will meet the following week. The time and location will remain at 9 o'clock in the morning. Right now, we have continued use of the Watsonville, this chamber, but it is likely that once the office is built out, that the board meetings can occur there in the boardroom at Monterey Bay Community Power's offices in Monterey. So I don't know if that'll be January or February, but we will certainly notify the board.
Yeah, I believe it's most likely for the policy board that your next meeting will be in Monterey. We got a pretty nice boardroom built out for you. We just need to finish it.
Yeah, and that's close to the airport, Monterey Airport. Is that correct? And
that is correct. That's it. The address is 70 Garden Court.
70 Garden Court.
Yeah.
And how many spaces are there for the public? Would there be?
For the board room is quite huge, and it will have plenty of room to have as many people from the public that may arrive. So we're probably going to put in maybe 25, 30 extra chairs in there. Of course, if we see more public coming in, we'll just buy some more chairs.
Yeah. With that said, I want to thank the Watsonville City for allowing us to have this facility. It's much more appropriate, and it's easier for us to conduct business and have these charts for the public to see and so forth. So thank you very much, Watsonville.
And they've been terrific, really. They're hosting us for the last 2 weeks and maybe for another week, and if
right,
our space is not ready. Incredibly helpful, yeah, between Director Gomez as well as City Manager here. They offered everything for free. They're very helpful, very supportive. We get parking tickets every day for free. Very nice. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. Glad we can do it.
Okay. And we'll a motion to adopt the calendar as proposed.
So moved.
Motion is second. All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes unanimously. That ends our public session. We were going to adjourn into closed session, conference with the legal counsel on a public employment matter. Is there anything reportable?
No.
No. Okay, then we will adjourn to our next meeting. Well, I'm not exactly sure where it's going to be, but March 7th of the Policy Board. And then there's a calendar for the operations board as well. Thank you very much for your interest in attending, and onward and upward. Have a great holiday season, everyone. Thank you.